All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the award-winning Sales Game Changers podcast. This is the special office hours Sales Professors Unplugged with a little bit of a twist. I'm going to be bringing on Dr. Howard Dover in a few moments here to talk about some exciting things that are happening at the University of Texas in Dallas. I want to remind people we transcribe every episode we've ever done. Go to salesgamechangerspodcast.com, salesgamechangerspodcast.com to listen to or read the transcriptions, Dr. Dover, of over 800 Sales Game Changers podcasts, including about 20 of our office hours Sales Professors Unplugged, where we typically interview sales professors at universities. Usually they're part of the USCA, and they're really have a great focus on helping selling professionals in college start their career. And we're very, very excited about that show. If you're watching today's show on YouTube, thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up. We would greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. All right, Dr. Howard Dover, I'm very excited to have you on the show. We're going to be talking about something very exciting that has emerged from what our good friend Nancy Nardin had created, and how she, gifted all of her sales landscape files to the University of Texas in Dallas, and what's happened since then, what you've done. But before we get started with that, give us a little bit of a background on yourself. Let our audience know who you are and why we're talking to you today.
Well, I'll try to give you an abbreviated, not the long version, but I've been at the University of Texas at Dallas for 13 years. When I arrived, I formed the Center here for Professional Sales. Um, Before that, about 5 years before that, I graduated with my PhD in quantitative methodologies at the University of Texas at Dallas and headed out to your neck of the woods there in the Mid-Atlantic region for my first job at Salisbury University, planning to be a quantitative researcher that taught classes at Salisbury University. And then the Great Recession hit and changed my whole life.
Mm.
As I began to realize that there's what we teach and what industry needs, and there was a gap. And I really, probably unhealthily so, I have not wanted that gap to exist the rest of my life. And so I constantly am out there trying to understand where is the puck moving in the hockey vernacular,
Mm.
and trying to figure out how to skate to the puck and get my students ready for 2 to 3 years out, if at all possible, which is it's a bit bold. Sometimes we miss, but most of the time we're talking with great partners who lead us along the way of where the puck's going.
That's great. And actually, I was down on your campus for a USCA meeting in 2025. I got to speak to some of your students who've graduated and have moved on. I got to spend a little bit of time down at the center, and it's great. So I love the work that you're doing, and I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about today. So again, Nancy Nardin, who is a friend of ours, and she had created some amazing research into MarTech and sales tech companies, and had actually even helped us out at the Institute for Effective Professional Selling with identifying some of the best companies in that space that we might want to talk to at the IEPS to sponsor some of our programs. And I know she had retired a couple of years ago, kind of lost a little bit of track. I saw an announcement that you had made that she had gifted her sales landscape files to the University of Texas, Dallas, and you've done some amazing stuff, which we're going to be talking about it. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how did that whole process come down, and just why did you accept this gift?
Well, I think I have to go a little bit back now. If you followed the history of Nancy's landscape, Sales Benchmark Index purchased Nancy Nardin's company,
Hmm.
and it became the SBI sales landscape for a few years. And Nancy worked for SBI. And then there came a period in which I assume the initial contract was over. And so we had conversations with SBI, and we had conversations with Nancy at that moment to say, hey, maybe that's something we might want to do. It was a round robin discussion, and it took about a year, and it came down to Nancy saying, "Well, why don't you just take it over?"
Mm,
Um, and so I have huge respect for Nancy. By the way, Nicholas 3K does similar work. I
mm,
always want to let people know that, I mean, G2 does this work, and
mm,
Gartner does this work, IDC does this work. What I see the value of the landscape is the digital artifact that shows the growth and the
mm,
magnitude of the sales platforms that exist in our space. And to me, that's the contribution. Now, Nancy did a lot of other things to
mm,
support her business, but the the real product of her work was that landscape. And
mm,
I use that all over the world in keynotes and academic presentations, and it was a barometer.
mm,
So every time I would use it and I'd say, I'd put it up on the screen. I usually use Nancy's because I know Nancy, and I'd
mm,
say, how many of you have seen this? And it would be a barometer no matter where I was presenting, anywhere in the world, academic or industry, because if not enough people raised their hand,
mm,
I knew I had to slow down.
mm,
And I had to talk about context and technology impact and how it's moving. If more than 30, 40, 50% of the people would raise their hand, then I could go forward. I could say, all right, well, let's talk about the trend lines in this. And so I found the work that Nancy did so invaluable to me. And so I, I had to go talk to the dean and say, hey, good news and bad news. We have the opportunity to receive a digital artifact and files and take over a project. And I said, so the good news is that we could do this. The bad news is that it takes work
mm,
to do this. And I said we'd have to allocate some students every semester throughout the year to do the work that Nancy's team would used to do. Um, and then we'll publish this twice a year is our goal at the moment. We'd love to get to quarterly, but I think it's going to be twice a year. And kudos to Hassan, who Hassan Perkul is our dean. He's been our dean for over 25 years, and he said, "So everybody in the world is going to have to come look at UTE's website to figure out
mm.
which technology is being launched." He said, "Yes, I want to do that." And so we have two part-time workers
Okay.
that work consistently throughout the year. We published the first version in January of this year. It
Okay.
was actually complete in October, but it takes us, we're a government entity. So it
Mm,
does take us a few more steps to be able to put it out there than a private entity because we have lots of rules and regulations for the state of
mm.
Texas and other challenges within our internal website teams. So we have hoops we get to go through that no one else has to go through. And so we were able to release it, but we're already in process of releasing. Now, the first release stayed true to Nancy's categories.
Hey, by the way, you know what? Before
Yeah.
we go into that, we I know it, so I kind of jumped right in. A lot of our audience may not know exactly what the sales landscape is. So,
Uh-huh.
kind of give us a description of generally what it is before we get into some of the details.
Sure. So the last release included the posting of 4,000 different logos and categorized those logos by the work and function that is being done. So you have the top of funnel, the middle of funnel, and then the management structure. And so you're then categorizing where do these logos fit
Mm,
in the work that's being done by a sales organization. Um, and so once again, to me, the value of the landscape artifact, the digital artifact that gets published a couple of times a year now, is that we get a snapshot in time to say, what does it look like right now? Our goal is not to do what G2 does, which is you can go into a category and find all the
mm,
companies uh, or Gartner and go in and figure out which ones are doing great, which ones are not doing great. We don't do a magic quadrant. We're just providing that categorization and geography presentation. So it's a landscape, it's a visual display of all of the apps that exist in the sales space. Now, do we get them all? Probably not.
Mm.
You can send an email to us. We have a form on our website. If you feel we missed you, you can tell us. You can hand raise, um, and we'll look at your company and properly categorize you. So that's the goal and that's the output. And now we also get to know a lot of data because um, uh, Nancy didn't always track the historic movement.
Mm.
And so for us, that's actually the advantage of being academics is we're capturing moments in time, and then we know the growth and the decline of different segments,
So
different.
let's talk about that specifically. So again, when I you had posted something up on LinkedIn, and it intrigued me for the reasons that we described in the beginning of this. You had mentioned in your post that you went from, and you I think you might actually have some updates on this. You went from 800 companies originally down to 600. Then you added another 4,000. So
Yes.
if you want to update those numbers, that's great. Feel free, tell us now. And then, why do you think this happened? And tell us a little bit more about those insights.
Well, there's always shift in this space, right? This is the SaaS, VC SaaS-based companies for the most part. So we're seeing entrants and exits pretty consistently, acquisitions and bankruptcy. I mean, so there's a lot of movement. And when you realize that when Nancy last published and SBI last published, it was 3 years ago.
Mm.
So when you think, if you look 3 years back, that we got it with 1,600,
Mm.
of which only 600 were alive,
Mm.
right? And so, but then we added back in another 3,500, bringing us to 4,000 logos. Um, and that's separate logo drops within the categories, representing about 32,000 brands.
Mm.
Um, but this is the interesting thing, Fred. So we published that. Our last snapshot was October. We took a new snapshot in February. We're up 25% on logos in
Wow.
just 4 months.
Mm.
In the categories. So, for example, this one isn't going to surprise you. AI sales assistants are up 20%
Yeah.
for the year. Um, if you want to look at another popping one is if we look at sales engagement, which is strange to me, that's up 18%. And then, of course, one of the hot items right now is sales coaching, which is up
Mm.
just under 20%. Lots of movement in that sales coaching space. One of that actually dropped is buyer intent providers is down 20%.
Mm. Just kind of curious, 4,000 some odd companies. How big is the biggest? And I'm guessing the smallest is some guy in his basement somewhere. Is that kind of the range made? How big is the biggest company? Or
Well, once again, I want to define what we're doing, what we're not doing, right?
right.
So we don't necessarily look at that storyline, but you wouldn't be surprised. Microsoft,
Okay.
Salesforce, these are the biggest, right?
Okay.
And then, you got the small, some of them we don't get visibility until we see it, right? So I'm always constantly looking on LinkedIn and various other sources to say, hey, is it in our database? Do we have it? And we begin tracking it. But we source the data through, G2 and you can look at Crunchbase and you can look at Gartner reports and things like that. So those are our primary sources. And once again, the project isn't so much finding that data, it's
Mm.
recategorizing them into the landscape categories and then providing that visual display. And it would seem that this is pretty straightforward, but Nancy had a team that did this. Now they did other things.
Mm.
And so can you imagine, Fred, being the kid on our campus or the one or two kids on our campus, that this is what they're doing? Is they're
Mm.
going out and identifying each of these new entrants into the field. They're looking at the acquisitions, who got acquired, where did they go, how did that? And so we've had 3 students do it up till now, and
Mm.
they end up walking out of here just they're the walking genius on sales technology.
I think it's gold. I mean, I think it's gold for those students, which was another thing. One of the great things is, again, at the IUPS, we've gotten to know a lot of the universities that have selling programs. And we've gotten to know, either a major, minor, or certificate or concentration. And, I've spoken to a lot of the students. And one of the great things and one of the reasons why we've gotten behind the office hour sales, Professors Unplugged, as I mentioned before, we're going to be giving out our first university Sales Educator of the Year award to Brian Collins from Virginia Tech. The community of students are so passionate, right, about this world that we live in, the professional selling world. And yeah, not everyone's going to make it hugely successful, but a lot of them will. And a lot of them are very passionate about the technology, right? And they're very passionate about the tools. So I would say if you're one of those three, I know you're going to be hitting the road and sharing some of the insights at various places this spring. Uh, give us some insights into what some of the things are you're going to be presenting.
Well, I think one of the things, we talked about some of the trend line pieces, right? So some of the areas that are new, some of the new areas that are just brand new categories, digital sales rooms,
Mm,
data demo automation software,
mm,
super minds,
super minds.
this area of super minds, and this idea that we have an AI avatar that
Yeah,
really operates as an AE,
gotcha.
maybe even an SDR. Of course, the massive growth area of AI sales assistants. I think that the challenge with the category of AI sales assistants is the fact that it's probably too big of a category.
Yeah,
It's a big category. So that's going to be part of the work moving forward is updating the categories from 3 years ago.
yeah,
We've already completed iteration one of that project, and now we're in the building phase of the next landscape with it'll be a two-phase process where we'll take our existing perfect mapping and we'll probably do an intermediate update, and then probably late summer we'll be able to add the new categorization where we don't have perfect mapping, because that work takes a lot longer to say, here's brand new areas, because with new technology
hmm
comes new motion,
mm,
comes new skill. And so some of it's old skill that just needs to be tweaked a little bit. I like the word motion
mm,
because skill, I don't think skill changes dramatically. I think the
mm,
motion changes. For
mm,
example, when we look at the recent gold medal performance of the American skater, Miss Liu, right?
mm,
I, her skills were the equivalent of many of her peers, right?
mm,
The skills that she had to deploy, the necessary elements of her skating routine were the same, and the skills required to do those are pretty consistently defined. But the motions that she
mm.
did were different
Yeah,
and elevated.
yeah.
And so I think that those, my friend Juliana Stancampiano from Oxygen EXP was the person who brought that into the Sales Enablement Society. I'm like, oh, I love the word motion.
Mm,
The idea of we have skill and then we have motion. And motion is the way we execute the skill.
mm.
And
Yeah,
that can be varied and nuanced. And the nuance creates exponential performance if we understand the differences.
that's great. I'm kind of curious. So I understand that you also created a course uh, at UTD, University of Texas, Dallas, called AI within the sales technology landscape, which was based on some of the data that you captured. First of all, is that true? And second of all, if it is, like, what do you teach in the class? What's the value? What's a student going to get if they come through that class?
Well, let me go a little deeper if I can. I'll try to be brief, but so Gartner put out a research item in January of 2025 saying that I thought it was 70+% of all CROs needed or wanted to hire a generative AI sales specialist in 2025. So the first question I had is, what is a generative AI
Mm,
sales specialist?
mm,
It doesn't matter when given that titles, over 70% of CROs said they needed to hire one. And so we looked at that, and the University of Texas at Dallas was formed by TI,
Yeah.
and they gave the land to the state and said, we want you to be a relevant university. If you stay relevant university, we'll keep funding you for everything you need. So we've been moving to market since our founding in 1969. So to me, when I saw that, I said, well, then we're going to create a certificate in AI for sales. And we already had two courses that were very AI heavy. And my dean insisted we create an AI for sales class, and we own the landscape, so we know the data. So we simply took Gartner's action-oriented design as from their keynote from last year's CSO summit and
Hmm.
said, let's move into the landscape and get our students to be thinking around action orientation to build agentic concepts and test the agentic concepts of the landscape, including risk of replacement by low code, no code solutions. And so it was a very early class. I mean, we all kind of said, hey, this nobody knows how to teach this, so we're going to learn together. And we took aspects of the landscape. Each team took a piece of the landscape and found a product, described the product, then using action-oriented design thinking, they determined what actions were being done by the software. Of those actions, which of them could be replaced with LLMs and which could be replaced with agentic using low code, no code solutions. And that was the whole class.
Wow. Well, it's interesting. We also had one of your professors, Samira Amirpour, on the
Yeah.
Office Hours Sales Game Changers podcast. I encourage people who are listening to this to go listen to her show. She went into a little more detail about the relationship with TI and how the university was created, et cetera. I'm kind of curious. I'm going to ask you two more questions. I'm going to ask you what's the benefit of all this to selling organizations. But before I do, I'm just kind of curious. You're an academic, but you're also in the professional sales world. What were some of your ahas, right? Once you took over this project and, once you started leading the people who were doing the research and the updating, what were like one or two things that were, gee, that I didn't realize that. Just kind of curious if you can think of anything.
Yeah, I think the big aha moment for me was, Terry Lowe. Terry Lowe
Mhm, of
helped me
course.
out years ago, almost a decade and a half ago, when I was getting into this. But my aha moment came when I came to Dallas, and I think it was one of the sales summits put on by Tim Clark when he was back at Salesforce, and he created these sales summits inside of Dreamforce. And even LinkedIn had their national event in New York. So it was the two of them. I
Yeah.
attended both of them that year. And I heard these people talking about exponential performance
Mm.
and that technology was enabling. I remember distinctly a presentation from a guy, Brian, forgetting his last name, Brian's going to kill me, from Microsoft. He presented in Vegas at LinkedIn, and he's showing that people who socially sell are 2x, 4x, and 7x performance. And I went up to him after the thing and I said, I just need, what? Because here I'm teaching, right? I'm just teaching stuff, which I think is a fair thing to say. When I was teaching back then, it was stuff. And I looked at that and said, I got to figure out what I should be teaching because there's exponential performance on the table. Lady at IBM was showing that she had a 3x performance differential, right? When she did a project. And I started realizing that technology properly deployed with proper skill and motion creates exponential performance.
Mm.
And so this has become my thrust for probably a decade. I
Mm.
wrote a book on, called The Sales Innovation Paradox, saying,
Yep.
with all the technology, why haven't we experienced more exponential performance? Instead, we hired more salespeople and had lower quota attainment. It makes no sense given the massive technology. And that's why I love the landscape, because to me, the landscape is that evidence of the explosion of technology and yet the reduction of performance,
Mm.
the waste that's occurring, the
Mm.
lower efficacy that's going on. And yet, when you train people around skill, motion, and give them the proper resources,
Yeah.
you don't give them the proper resources without the training and the skill, right? You look at the skill, you look at the motion, you look at the difference in the way you are precise and relevant when you're communicating. Um, it lists everything. So you get a student who's in Mexico City just posted her first full year over at Salesforce in Mexico, one of our alumni. She's 256% of her quota. I'm
Great.
not surprised, Fred. We hear those numbers. My favorite one this last year was 1,000%.
Great.
That's that exponential performance. That's where I say I'm skating to where the puck's headed, right?
Yeah.
Let's not, the game we're playing is young people don't know what they don't know.
Mm.
We can train them to perform at peak levels.
Wow. That is very, very cool. And it's, I'd love to learn more. Well, I will talk about, well, I'll ask you one final question. I'm just kind of curious. Um, is this a product now? Can selling organizations purchase this, or is this, you're just making this available to the world on the University of Texas Dallas website?
Oh, the
What is
landscape.
the landscape? Yeah, what is the,
Yeah, it's out on the UTD website.
okay.
And
Is there
if you
anything to
go to our
buy, or is it
UTD
just available?
website, the UTD Center for Professional Sales website, you can find the landscape. And then you can also find um, something called our Pulse Report, which would probably take another podcast actually, but we're doing something around, once again, we're skating to where the puck's going to be. When you deploy AI technology, your problem is no longer skill, it's attribution. What are the attributes the salesperson needs if the AI is going to increase the expectation, which it is
Mm.
and does? So you got to increase the curiosity and the business acumen of the salesperson. So we've been working on what we call the Business Acumen Project for 3 years at UTD.
Wow. Very, very good. Well, I'll tell you what, before I ask you for your final action step, again, this is an office hours Sales Professors Unplugged podcast. Again, I mentioned I had Samira Amarpour was on the show. She went into detail about your program and what students get and the curriculum that you offer and the value to the various companies that may want to be corporate sponsors. Is there anything you want to get us updated on that's happening at University of Texas, Dallas, that we should let the audience know? Again, this is a huge thing, but is there anything else that you want to share before I ask you for your final action step?
Yeah, I think this idea around the business acumen and the concepts of precision and relevance, right? This idea that we live in a world where we can be extremely precise.
Mm.
And we live in a world where we can be AI augmented to be extremely relevant for the moment that we are allowed to be precise. And when we do that, we
Mm.
end up with exponential performance. And this is something any company can do. And to do that, you do need to make sure that your people have increased acumen and they need to be genuinely curious. And that's why we've been working on that project for a couple of years. Can we build it? We have an answer. The answer is yes.
Yes.
Trying to prove it very meticulously, which is
Yeah.
hard to do, but we're working on it and we think we're there. So
That's amazing. Again, congratulations again. When I saw your announcement, again, I mentioned in the early part of this podcast that we're fond of Nancy, and she was very kind to us at the Institute for Effective Professional Selling, and I was very excited to see the developments. And I applaud you on what's happened and what's going to continue happening. Dr. Howard Dover, University of Texas, Dallas, give us a final action step. You've given us a lot of great ideas along the way. For people listening to the show or reading the transcript, give us something specific that they should do right now to take their sales career to the next level.
focus on skill
Mm.
before deploying technology. So work on effectiveness before efficiency. So if you can focus at the individual, the org level, or the manager level at effectiveness first. Then you bring in efficiency and you'll have exponential performance.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you've tied those together throughout the course of today's podcast. All right, once again, this is the Office Hours Sales Professors Unplugged. I want to thank Dr. Howard Dover for being on today's show. My name is Fred Diamond.